Well, that didn't go very well. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, at least for those of you who are actually back, as with the way this one goes, with the Kraken losing 5-0 to the St. Louis Blues, I'm not necessarily expecting there to be as many people watching this one as we usually have, or maybe I shouldn't say usually have, but have had in the last couple, with those being wins. Now, usually R&R stands for recap and reaction. I mean, I guess it actually usually means rest and relaxation, but after how the last month went with all the COVID postponements, I don't think that rest or relaxation should be something that the Kraken need too much more of. Although, with it being the second game of a back-to-back and how this game ends up going, maybe there's an argument to be made there. Either way though, with this one, I think I am going to mix things up a little bit and go with reaction and then the recap, as, well, let's just say I don't think too many people are looking forward to the recap of a 5-0 Kraken loss. Unless you're a Blues fan, in which case, too bad. But I will give at least a little bit of lineup context before we get into the reaction, as the Kraken do end up mixing up their lines quite a bit going into this game. To some extent, that's somewhat expected on the second game of a back-to-back. You're going to give some guys here and there a little bit more rest, but still, mixing up the lines as much as the Kraken did on the second game of a back-to-back, that does seem a little bit more abnormal, especially considering they are coming off of back-to-back wins and won the night before. Though, to be honest, I'm not sure that plays much of a role in this game. For one thing, Eberle did say after the game that at this point they've all pretty much played with each other a fair amount and know how to play with each other, so mixing up lines shouldn't be a huge factor in the first place. Not to mention the fact that when they do go back to more of the lines that they've played with in the last couple of games, in the third period, well, it doesn't really go much better for them. Defensively, there's at least a little bit of change there as well. Oleksiak, not being the difference here, is still out with illness, so for the third pairing, it's Borgen and Fleury who ends up getting paired with him, back for the first time in the lineup in quite a while, taking Lauzon's spot in this game. And finally, once again, with this being the second game the Kraken are playing in 2 nights, Grubauer having started the night before, and Drieger still in COVID protocol, that means that it's Joey Daccord who ends up getting the start in this one. And I know what you're probably already thinking right away. Okay, it's a 5-0 game. Daccord got the start against a very good Blues team who's on a roll right now. So, yeah, I guess it makes sense that he gets shelled a little bit. But honestly, this game is really not on Daccord to me in almost any way. He probably could have had a couple of stops on a couple of the goals, but the Blues have just way too many prime scoring opportunities in this. And to be honest, a fair amount of them don't end up going into the net, as this game really could have been a lot more ugly than it was, with the goaltender not playing as well as I think Daccord actually did play in this one. I mean, even after the game, both Eberle and Hackstall both said that Daccord played pretty well in this one. Hackstall did say there was a couple of learning opportunities on a couple of the goals for Daccord, which I can't really argue with, but both of them point out, especially Eberle, that the Kraken as a whole defensively just ended up leaving Daccord out to hang a few too many times in this game. And yes, sure, usually in post-game press conferences, you're not going to have too many players, especially veteran ones, calling out the goaltender and leaving them to blame for what ends up happening in the game. And same usually goes for coaches, unless they're Dave Tippett this season, but still, especially with it being a younger goaltender like Daccord, you're not going to see too much blame end up being put on them by the coaches or players around them. Still though, in this game, I think that it was the truth and not just them trying to protect the goaltender in the media. So really, what this game ends up coming down to is the Kraken just once again ending up in another early hole, down 2-0 after the first period, off of a mistake on a power play of their own, and then allowing the Blues, who are one of the 3 best power play teams in the NHL, to get a power play goal of their own. And then, although they do play fairly well throughout the second period, in the third period, they just end up pressing a little bit too much and are not very responsible with the puck and allow way too many odd man breaks going the other way for Daccord to be able to handle all of them, and eventually a couple do end up in the back of the net, leading to the blowout 5-0 score. Again, after the game, Hackstall also mentioned that he saw a noticeable lack of energy in the Kraken game tonight, which I do think showed itself a fair amount, whether or not that was the second half of a back-to-back or whatever the reason was. The Kraken, although maybe the effort was there, the energy and decision-making certainly wasn't. And another thing that was definitely lacking for the Kraken in this one, especially in that third period, is what Hackstall after the game called efficiency with the puck, where the Kraken, in a lot of ways, started looking like that team we saw towards the beginning of the season where they were just not connecting on passes or having that crisp tape-to-tape passing that you need to have at a consistent rate at the NHL level. And for the Kraken, it was anything but consistent, especially on the power plays, where passes were either completely missing their target or ending up in the feet of the player rather than on their stick, which takes away the chance on a one-timer. And that's just in the best case scenario. In the worst case, it can lead to an intercepted pass or a bobbled puck that the Blues can then pick up going the other way to get those odd man opportunities. Or, I guess, whatever team the Kraken are playing, but in this case, it's the Blues. All of which leads to a game where at least the base stats I think are very misleading. At least in the fact that shots on goal wise, it was a fairly even game. The Kraken have 27 shots to the Blues 31, so slight edge to the Blues, but certainly not enough to have a 5-0 score. However, the danger of those shots and where they end up coming from, well, as you can see from the heat map provided by Natural Stat Trick from those shot opportunities, yeah, you can see where the difference is here, where the Blues have a very big dark spot all around the Kraken net and right in front of it. Meanwhile, for the Kraken, there's almost virtually nothing at all in front of the Blues net, and really the only spot where they're getting consistent shots off from is way up in the corner from basically the lowest danger possible spot that they could be taking shots from. So then, as far as the game itself and how all this ends up happening, well, actually, the Kraken get off to a much better start in this game than the last one. I mean, for one thing, they don't give up a goal in the first minute, but they actually get the early press off on the Blues, who are able to press back, but it's the Kraken who get the early power play on a hit to the head of Johansson. And while this power play does look pretty controlled and is able to at least create the opportunity for chances on goal, the Kraken are just a little too hesitant to take the shot, too often looking for that extra pass, which is a problem that we've seen with them before and definitely rears its head again, especially in the first period of this game, even outside of this power play. Eventually, a bobbled puck and a mismanaged transition through the neutral zone leads to a 2-on-1 chance for the Blues going the other way, shorthanded, and the pass does end up getting through just under Dunn's stick across to Bozak, who pretty much at this point has a tap-in goal with really not much of anything Decord can do to stop this one. Even with just 17 seconds left in the power play after the shorthanded goal for the Blues, the Kraken do almost put a goal in as Eberle has a puck go just under his stick on what would have been a tap-in goal for him, but the Blues are able to dodge the bullet there, and then coming out of the Kraken power play with the 1-goal lead, they do kind of start to take control of the game and end up getting a power play of their own where, well, especially after a couple of games where the Kraken have been sending the opposing team to the power play pretty frequently against a team who coming into the day was second, or at least tied for second for power play percentage, was going to be key for the Kraken to keep them off the power play. That doesn't happen here, and the Blues show why they're so good on the power plays. They do end up capitalizing on it with the power play goal. It does come on a shot that ends up leaking through the 5-hole of Decord and gets finished off by Shen behind him. But again, if you let a team as good on the power play as the Blues are onto 4 power plays throughout the game as the Kraken do in this one of those is probably going to end up in the back of the net, regardless of how much the goaltender has to say about it. So now, already before the halfway point of the first period, there's been 2 power plays in the game, one for both teams, but both goals, one on each power play, have gone in the Blues' favor. Both teams do end up getting another power play before the end of this period, though mercifully, at least for Seattle, neither one leads to a goal against them. Although, with that being said, the Blues did end up getting another open shot off on Decord on the next Kraken power play, so yeah, things really not going well for the Kraken power play at this point in the season. Which is definitely a bit frustrating after it finally seemed like they had figured out a consistent play and way to generate shot opportunities, but it just has not been working out ever since those couple of goals that they were able to put in a few games ago. The second period is a much more back and forth, evenly played period than the first, as it does end scoreless, with the Blues still leading 2-0 after 2. Although, that's really just speaking to the flow of the game in the second period, as the scoring opportunities and chances off on net all heavily favor the Blues, as, like we talked about earlier, all the Blues opportunities are coming right around the Kraken net and right in front of it, while all the Kraken chances and shots off on net are pretty much all coming from the outside. So, honestly, by the end of the second period, I at least felt like the Kraken were fortunate to still just be down 2-0, with all of those chances in and around the Kraken net that the Blues were able to get, often with more net front presence of their own in front of the Kraken net than the Kraken had defensively. Somehow, Joey Daccord is able to keep the puck out of the Kraken net, with a little bit of help on a couple of pretty blatantly missed empty net opportunities for the Blues, on crossing passes where usually those would be tap-ins, but the Blues missed the net a couple of times. And it is also certainly worth mentioning that Daccord does come up with one especially spectacular toe save on an O'Reilly breakaway that also helps this game from getting out of hand. At least at this point anyway. Both teams do also end up getting a power play one each throughout the course of the second period, again obviously with neither one of them scoring. The Kraken power play comes off of a dirty headhunting hit on Donato from Bortuzzo, which really, I was kind of surprised was just a 2-minute minor. I think the only thing that kept this from even maybe leading to not only a 5-minute major, but even an ejection for Bortuzzo, is the fact that Donato was able to get up from it and continue to play the rest of the game without showing concussion-like symptoms. That Kraken power play does take a little while to get going, but is able to create a number of pretty good scoring opportunities late in it, that again obviously don't lead to anything as far as goals are concerned. So then we start the third period with the Kraken down 2-0, which certainly isn't ideal to be starting a third period down 2 goals, but it's still not anything they can't potentially come back from. However, 24 seconds after puck drop, Tarasenko finds Buchnevich on a crossing pass, and it's now 3-0. Yeah. Shortly after, the Kraken do get a power play, so maybe if they can score on this one, then a comeback is still possible. But the power play really doesn't end up going anywhere, as once again, the Blues get almost as many shots off on the Kraken net as the Kraken get on the Blues net during the Kraken power play. And not long after it gets killed off, Parenko on a Kraken mistake gets on a partial breakaway where Eberle ends up hooking him, and a penalty shot is awarded, which Parenko is able to capitalize on. So now it's 4-0, and yeah, at this point the game's pretty much out of reach. But just in case you don't think that a game that's 4-0 with about 12 minutes left in the third is one that's out of reach, not too much later, Kyrou gets a chance wide open in the slot in front of the Kraken net, decides not to take the shot, but instead dekes around Daccord, who came a little bit too far out of the net, gets the puck around Daccord's leg and then around the post, and it's now 5-0. So yeah, it's definitely out of reach at this point. From there through, well, the last 10 minutes of the game, really the only things of consequence are, well, like maybe I shouldn't say consequence, but the only things worth noting are a whole bunch of traded penalties between the Kraken and Blues, one of which being Borgen suplexing Sundqvist to the ice, which he doesn't get the call for. Hilariously, it's Sundqvist who gets a roughing call for shoving Borgen a little bit as he gets up out of it, which then is canceled out by Fleury getting a cross-checking call for lightly pushing Sundqvist as he's skating away. Sundqvist takes a second and then sells it like he's in the Premier League, going to the ice and drawing the cross-checking call on Fleury. So maybe not the best officiated series of events, but it goes to 4-on-4, at least for a very short period of time. Because up next, it's Dunn getting a little bit of a slew foot off on his old teammate Kyrou, who does not take kindly to it, and those two trade roughing calls and also head to the box as we continue 4-on-4 play. And then eventually, Borgen does find his way into the box on a cross-checking call of his own. So yeah, the boxes are getting pretty crowded at this point. Again, none of this ends up leading to a goal or really anything of any sort of consequence by the end of the game. It's just a whole bunch of chippiness between a couple of teams, as can happen in blowouts like this game was. Eventually, later in the game, Sunquist did try to go after Borgin, as he was clearly still not happy about being WWE'd to the ice by Borgin, but this doesn't even lead to a scrap between the two of them, as Borgin just kind of skates away from it, I think somewhat unaware that Sunquist was coming after him in the first place. But again, we get to the end of this game with it ultimately being a 5-0 win for the Blues, and for the Kraken, definitely not a particularly pretty one in just about any way, with really the only thing that went well in this game being a few pretty nice saves from Decord, which is probably not what you would be expecting from a game that ends 5-0. As always, I'd love to hear what you guys thought of this game down in the comment section. Again, that third straight win for the Kraken remains elusive as they're not able to get it in this one, so I guess they'll just have to win the next 3 straight games. I'd also like to hear what you guys thought of this different format of the R&R, going with the reaction before the recap, rather than usually how I've done it with the recap then the reaction, or maybe any other things that you'd like to see with these R&Rs going forward, as I might be willing to mix things up in the back half of the season and try a few new things and see what works for next year. With that said though, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below, even if you didn't like or enjoy the game. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken.